something for us again. Should I be turned down a little bit, you think, again? Or is that? I think so. A little bit? Or
That's fine.
is that good?
That's good.
Okay, good. We're good. Let's open in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time, this gathering, and may we lift your name. It's true, we're our lives, and we look back over 50 years, and there's probably a lot of people that have gone on, and our lives are as important as we think we might be. It's basically our lives are like a stone thrown in the water, and there's a ripple, and it's gone. But Lord, as we are here, we are your instruments. Lord, we would ask that you could use us, that you would use us, that we would listen and be put in the right hands, in your hands, Lord, to be used by you. Bless each one that is here. May we hear your words today. May it be your words, we ask. All this in your name. Amen. So, the last couple Sundays, if you haven't been here, I'm going to just track back a little bit because it's important. We've talked about Gideon a little bit. And he's not even slowly, because I'm a King David kind of guy. You know, the guy that takes the sword and chops people's heads off. He does that kind of stuff. That kind of draws me, you know. And I've always said, I would be on, if, you know, his group of guys, that's where I would be. I would be with King David. And I'm sure King David would look at me and go, get out of here. You'll never make the cut. Get out of here. So I would like to think that I would be there. But then I've been looking and studying about Gideon. And I know the story, but I've been studying it a little bit more. And I'm thinking, this guy is awesome, right? Because I can relate to him a lot. And so we've been studying a little bit about Gideon. And we did a couple sermons on Gideon, but we haven't got to the good part yet. What I consider the good part is when God moves into his life and does damage in the name of God, in the name of the Lord, against the enemy. So we haven't talked about that yet. So I can't leave Gideon alone until we speak about the victory. So this Gideon guy, who is this Gideon guy? This is how he looks at himself. I'm the least of all of, I'm the weakest of this whole bunch. I'm with the tribe. There's 12 tribes. There's one of the tribes is called Manasseh, and that's the weakest. It's a messy tribe. And he's part of this tribe. And he's the youngest one in the family. He is, like he even said, I'm the weakest. I'm the least of all these people. And I'm not that strong. And so this is what happens. And if you look in the Old Testament, the Israelites, especially in the book of Judges, there are judges that are leaders for Israel. And I say, this is my personal opinion, that Gideon will become the goat. Now, if you're cool, the goat, you don't think of a goat like at Jim's place. You think of goats like goats, Tom Brady, greatest of all time. That's what I think of when I think about goats. And I think of Gideon as the greatest judge that Israel ever had. But we meet Gideon on a threshing floor. He's threshing in a wine press, right? Remember this? And so I'm going back, and the problem with me going back is when I do a sermon, I basically file it, and I kind of forget about it, because I've got to get the next one going, and I don't have a lot of room in here. Anybody, you know? There's not a lot of room left. And so you got to file it, you got to move it out. But I'll try to go back, and so Gideon is this guy that is hiding. See, because in the Old Testament, many times the Israelites, God would bring them up. He would take them out of Egypt and all this stuff. And maybe we talked about it last week a bit, or yesterday even. But God would rescue them and do great things for them. And then they would choose to not listen to God. And because they chose not to listen to God, they would fall into the hands of the enemy. And so as we see Gideon here, his group, his people, are in the hands of an enemy, and it's a 7-year cycle. And this enemy is called the Midianites. And it talks about these Midianites that, so the Israelites were like, we got a future, we got to believe in this, we got some stuff we want to do. And so they plant all these good stuff, you know, they want to harvest, they got these plans of a future. This is going to be, okay, so this is the day, this is the season, we're going to get out there, we're going to do this, we've got animals, and we've got all these things. We've got all these livestock. And as soon as they would get out in the fields, the Midianites, who they were in this 7-year cycle of oppression from the Midianites, here they come. Talks about them like swarms of locusts. And they would come and you couldn't count all their animals that they rode in on. You couldn't count them. It was just like locusts coming. And they would drive them back drive the Israelites back from a thought of a future. It would drive them back to their past. Not even their present, but their past. And so this is where Gideon, so we meet Gideon. Here's this Gideon. Little do we know he's going to be the goat, the greatest of all time. Here he is, and he's threshing wheat in a wine press. And it's not bad that you're in a wine press doing it. It's just the wrong application, right? It's the wrong. Am I boring you? I've said this already. Cindy says I'm going too fast, but I only have so much time. So in this wine press, it's not bad to thresh wheat in a wine press. It wasn't like he was in the wine press getting drunk. He was in there threshing wheat. But the thing is, the wine press was low. And if you're going to thresh wheat, you got to go up high. You got to go up where the wind is. Because when you thresh it, the wind will blow away the chaff. And that's how it works. But he's down in this wine press because he's afraid of the Midianites, and he's angry, and he's frustrated, and he's perplexed. And he says, they call on God, like, you have basically turned your back on us, and I've heard all this stuff about our forefathers and what they have done in the past, but I sure don't see it. Ever said that before? I don't see what happened to my great-grandfather. This happened in his life. Man, there was some crazy stuff. God was moved, but I don't see it. And the angel of the Lord and God made it clear that you have not listened to me. It wasn't that God has turned his back, it's that Israel had turned their back. And anyways, God still sent an angel. He sat down and he looked at this guy that was hiding in a wine press, threshing wheat, who should have been on the mountain threshing wheat. And that angel comes, and this angel, and I said this before, usually when angels pop up on the scene, usually there's this thing where it says in parentheses, do not be afraid. Because if it was an angel that was like the one that you have on yourself, that pretty little angel, you wouldn't have to say, do not be afraid. But most angels are the ones with cauliflower ears. They're the UFC fighters, and they are scared. They can be scary looking. And they're not all the pretty little angels, but this time it doesn't say it. But the angel shows up, and the angels you don't mess with the angels. And he looks at Gideon, who's hiding, and he looks at him and he says, mighty warrior. And Gideon goes, you talking to me? I'm not the mighty warrior, I'm high. He knows, but God sees who you can be, who you are supposed to be. So this is Gideon. He's hiding. So this is where we meet him. And Gideon, he does some stuff, and he feels disabled. But then it says, go in the strength that I've given you. When you feel disabled, remember I said that last night? Go. When you are disabled, go. Put go in front of it. Go means God is able. You write it all down. God is able. So this is this Gideon, and he's supposed to lead these people out of oppression from the Midianites. But we stopped there, and we didn't see. Who doesn't want the ending? Like, I want to see the ending. I want to see, this is a Batman or this is Lord of the Rings type stuff. I want to see the three, however, when good overcomes evil. And so here we are in Judges chapter 7. And this is this Gideon. And he's had a lot of questions. And the angel looks at him and says, mighty warrior, and he doesn't believe all these things. I think you've turned your back on me, God. And then the angel says all these things, and he still has a hard time believing. But now we pick it up. This conversation is still going on. This is Gideon. If you got your Bibles, Judges chapter 7. So early in the morning, Jerubbaal, that is Gideon. So Gideon has received a new name. And he received a new name because he was supposed to tear down his father's altar. His father's altar was an altar towards Baal. And he was so afraid. Here's this mighty warrior who had received direction to tear down this altar that his father had made. But he's like too scared to do it during the day. So he goes at night, and I can't blame him because this guy's getting ready to take on another nation, to overcome big enemies, swarms of locusts. But when you have a lion inside of you, lions don't run from locusts. But he was running, but he was running at night. So he still's not quite sold on this. So he goes at night and he tears down this altar. And the people wake up in the morning, who did this? Who did this? And they find out about him. And so they give him a new name, Jerubbaal, which means Baal will contend with him. So that's his new name. Great. They're just making up names for me now. I didn't even get a say on it. It don't sound good because Baal, and he said, you know what? If Baal's so great, he can look after himself. So they gave him this name. So early in the morning, Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, and all his men camped at the spring of Herod. The camp of Midian was north of them in the valley near the hill of Morah. This does sound like Lord of the Rings a little bit. And the Lord said to Gideon, you have too many men for me to deliver Midian into their hand. Did you hear that? That's not how it works, God. God says, Gideon, you've got too many men for me to deliver you from the hands. That's not how it works. You can never have too many. But God says something a little different. You've got too many. You have too many men for me to deliver Midian into their hands in order that Israel may not boast against me that her own strength has saved her. Oh, I see what's going on now. So you don't get there and say, look what I did. Announce now to the people, anyone who is trembles with fear, may turn back and leave Mount Gilead. So 22,000 men left. Well, 10,000, at least 10,000 still remain. The Lord said to Gideon, there are still too many men. Take them down to the water, and I will sift them for you. And if I say, this one shall go with you, he shall go. But if I say, this one shall not go with you, he shall not go. So Gideon took the men down to the water, and there the Lord told him, separate those who lap the water with their tongues like a dog from those who kneel down to drink. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to separate them, and I'm going to hopefully take the bigger crowd. Right? We want the bigger. We do need some people, God. 300 men lap with their hands and their mouths, and and the rest got down to their knees and drank. And the Lord said to Gideon, with the 300 men that lapped, I will save you and the Midianites into your hands. Let all the other men go, each to his own place. So Gideon sent the rest of the Israelites to their tents, but kept the 300 who took over the provisions and trumpets of the others. And now the camp of Midian lay below him in the valley during the night. The Lord said to Gideon, get up and go down to the camp, because I am going to give it into your hands. So this is the kind of God. It doesn't make sense when you've got too many. I want many. If I'm going to take on the Midianites, if I'm going to overthrow them, I want many. But it doesn't make sense. But don't you want God to recruit for you? Because he knows the end. I want God to recruit for me. And it seems like a lot. They got a lot, right? Remember God? Swarms of locusts. And here I got dogs, guys that are lapping like dogs. And they got swarms of locusts. I can't even count them, and I got 300. And that movie, 300, they were good. But I don't know if we can still take on all these swarms of locusts. So this is the problem that we see. Gideon, who will become the GOAT, the greatest of all time judges in Israel, he is beginning to be used like an instrument in God's hands. And so when you think about instruments, get ready, Debbie. When you think about instruments, I think about weird ways and stuff that God has. And I've been reading the Bible a lot, and there's some. Have you ever read the Old Testament? Like, there's some crazy stuff in there. And so instruments, think about, God has a weird way about using instruments. For example, there's Samson, he was a judge, and so he's going to take down 1,000 Philistines, and what does he do? He takes a jawbone of a donkey. Or if we were at a men's retreat, we call it jawbone of a you know what. Or we read the King James Version, and that's what we'd say. Right? You read the King James Version. So he took the jawbone of a donkey, and he wielded it and killed 1,000 Philistines with him. That guy is, it was perfect for him because that's who Samson was. But it was an unusual tool. It was an unusual instrument. But God uses unusual instruments. Are you getting the fact that I'm trying to say that you're an instrument? I'm not saying you're a tool. You're an instrument. You're an instrument, and God, you are these are interesting instruments. A jawbone? And then I was reading about this king who was an evil king. And I already shared it with some people. Carrie and Marty and Cindy. And anyways, there was this evil king. And so he kind of liked this girl. And you know what? We're always trying to find new names for our kids. This is a cool name, and I really mean it. And I wouldn't be sad if I had a granddaughter named JL. Because there was this woman, her name was JL. Jael. That's a cool name. And there was this evil king that came into her tent. And she's like, oh, can I get you some warm milk? Can I make you some warm milk? And he's like, well, certainly you can. But he had other plans. And so she gave him some warm milk, and he fell asleep. And she took a tent spike and drove it through his skull. God uses kind of weird instruments, right? He will do. God, sometimes you got to get dirty when you fight the devil. And she got dirty, JL. Anyways, I'm just throwing out there, Grace. So this whole thing about instruments. God will use instruments, weird instruments, interesting instruments. But what I'm saying is you are an interesting instrument. You are a very important instrument. You are a very valuable instrument that Christ gave everything for. And so you think, I'm not that valuable. I don't think that, I'm that good. And Gideon was an instrument, and he didn't even know it, but he was in the wrong hands. It said that the Israelites were in the hands for a 7-year cycle, were in the hands of the Midianites, in the hands of the enemy for 7 years. And they were in it, and they were oppressed, and they were repressed, and they were depressed. And when the angel came and looked at Gideon, and he said, mighty warrior, he didn't even know who he was. I don't think I am. Because when you're in the wrong hands, you don't even know sometimes. If you're in the wrong hands, you don't even know what instrument you are, let alone that you are an instrument. And so, mighty warrior, he's been in the hands of the enemy for 7 years. He said, I'm no mighty warrior, I'm just hiding, trying to survive. So this is what happens when you have a valuable instrument. See, I don't even know how to hold this, and it's made for righties. Huh? Is that bad?
Well, you can't.
So if you got a pretty valuable instrument, right? This costs, how much did I pay for this?
You should remember it.
So it's a valuable instrument. You're a valuable instrument. You are a very important, valuable instrument. You're an interesting instrument, but you're very valuable. This is valuable. Valuable. I don't want to buy it again. So, so I put it in my hands. Sound good? Pretty good? It doesn't sound that good because it's in the wrong hands. But if you put it in the right hands, it sounds a little bit different. Just play me something. In the right hands. Do you need a pick?
No.
Okay. So in the right hands. Thank you. So, you see, this is the illustration that you are an instrument for God. You are an instrument for God. But it depends which hands you are in. This is an instrument, valuable instrument, but in the wrong hands, it's no good. It's not doing what you're supposed to do. But if it gets in the right hands, so that's the illustration. And the application that comes along with this is sometimes in our lives we find ourselves playing in the hands of sin, and playing in the hands of the enemy. And because we do that, and it feels good. It feels good for a while. But then all of a sudden, they start playing us. And so this is what happened with Gideon. He was in the hands of the enemy, and all of a sudden, and the Midians knew how to play Israel. And they oppressed them and depressed them. They were bigger and stronger and outnumbered them. As soon as they went out to plant and do all these things, they would come in and wipe them out. They knew how to control them. And it's in the wrong hands. Israel in the wrong hands. They didn't even know who they were. And so if we find ourselves in the wrong hands, if we're not being used by God, we're being used by the world, we may not even know what we're good for. And so this is where we find ourselves. That is the application. And so Gideon is in the wrong hands. Mighty warrior. And he goes, pardon me? He says that, pardon me. I don't think so. You're talking to the wrong guy. So God has to work on Gideon. God has to do a few things to get him to where he needs him. And so this is the first thing that God does with Gideon. He has to get Gideon to let up a few things, to let go of a few things. And I'm not telling you that having stuff being taken away, I'm not saying that you have to let go of everything that you've got. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. But sometimes things will disappear in our lives or be taken from us in our lives, and we will blame the devil for it. But it's actually God doing it because he's making room for something new. Because we depend on that stuff so much. That stuff, and then all of a sudden, and we attribute it to Satan. He took it from me. The devil, he's taking it from me. The enemy is taking it from me. But sometimes we depend on that stuff so much, and God looks at you as a valuable instrument, and the only way he's going to get you in his hands is he has to get your dependence off of stuff and get your dependence on him. And so that's where we find Gideon. He has to get rid of a few things. And it starts with these people. He's got 32,000 people that he's going to take on the Midianites with. That's pretty good. I think we could make our own swarm with 32,000 people. But, God talks to him and says, just tell him whoever's trembling, just spit that out there, Gideon. Whoever's trembling, you can leave and go home. So, okay, Gideon's like, okay, I'll do it, God. And there'll probably be a few. So I'll just say, okay, everyone that's trembling, you can go home. You can tremble a little bit. You don't have to. 22,000 people go home. And Gideon's like when I meant tremble, I didn't really start crying and stuff. I mean, you can be a little bit afraid. And anyways, there it goes. And God, this doesn't seem like it's the way, but I would rather have God recruit for me than anyone else. So 22,000 men of the 32,000 men are gone now. There is 10,000 left. And Gideon's counting his losses and going, I don't know if we stand a chance, but 10,000 is better. And God's not even done yet. He says, take them down to the water. And any of them that get down on their knees and just put their face in the water and just start drinking, just like this, and they don't have their face up looking around, you can send them home too. And Gideon's like, oh, this is going to be bad. Who am I going to keep? Anyone that's like a dog. He gets down there and kind of just, kind of licks it and looks up. And he's always looking up. And that's, I've never watched a dog drink too much. What?
Not the dog.
No. Yeah, so they're the ones that are like a dog. Yes. And anyways, I never argued from the stage before. But, man, something new every day. But anyways, they're like dogs. There's 300 that are like this. And don't you want people, do you want to fake it and have your head down, not paying attention to what's going on? Or do you want to have people that are got your back because they're always looking? They're always, they were drinking, but they were looking. That's the ones you want. God knew that. He said, now you can keep those 300 people. Now, you can tell all the rest of them to go home, but they can leave their trumpets. So they take these trumpets, if you know about, and I'm not I'm not a musician. I know you probably think I am, but I'm not. And when it comes especially to air or wind instruments, I'm definitely not. We had a trumpet, right, when the Bruins won the cup and we went, anyway, it's a different story, but we blew on that thing. We didn't know what we were doing. But when it comes to wind instruments and trumpets and all this stuff, there's two things that come in to perspective in order to play these things. First of all, you have to have somebody who knows where to put his hands. And second of all, you have to have breath control, wind control when you're blowing on these things. And so this is kind of what we're talking about when we were bought with a price, and it talks about, Christ Jesus, he brought us from death to life. So in order to come from death to life, what do you need? You need breath. You need that breath. And Jesus knows everything about the breath. We need that breath. He understands that breath. And so you came today, and we came as a gathering, but I believe that it's even more than that God wants to breathe on you today. I haven't had peace in a long time. Maybe you haven't let God breathe on you. And I talked to Cindy about this. Maybe we can, and I don't think it'll even work, but I can't help but think of that song. That song, Live.
Live.
You go.
Dry bones hear the word of the Lord.
Live.
Live.
Dry bones hear the word of the Lord. You ever heard that song? So this is what happens when God breathes on the valley floor. There's bones. When he says, live, you live. When he breathes, you breathe. And so you haven't had peace for a while. Your world is upside down. Maybe you need to let God breathe into your life, because that is where the life is. And so we find Gideon now, and he's down to 300 people. And he's afraid. And he says he gets the direction from God now, keep those 300 trumpets. And I'm sure his men are going, okay, we're happy that you, sort of happy, but I don't know if we're going to make it through this. But anyways, why do we have trumpets? Tell them guys to leave their swords. But they're leaving trumpets behind. But God will use weird instruments. God will definitely use weird instruments in our life. And we are kind of weird, and he will definitely use us. You know what? What is that verse? 2 Corinthians 10:4. Our weapons of warfare are not carnal, but are mighty for the bringing down of strongholds. Mighty in God for the bringing down of strongholds. Our weapons are not carnal, are not swords, but they are mighty in nature, in God, for bringing down strongholds. So we got some weird weapons, we got some trumpets. In order to run trumpets, you got to know where to put your hands. You have what it takes in you to do it. That's what I want to get across today, because we get bummed. You read social media and you get bummed and you feel bombarded. You look what's happening in the schools and you feel kind of bombarded. You see some stuff going on all over the place. You go to work and you feel kind of bombarded. You feel a bit of this stuff, but I want to tell you that you have what it takes. And so here is Gideon, and he has done so many things in questioning God, and even in chapter 6, which we didn't read about, he's just constantly questioning God. And there's an angel standing in front of him. And the angel says, just go in the strength, mighty word, go in the strength that I've given you. And then, so Gideon's like, okay, I'll go do this, and then I'll go in the night and I'll burn down that altar to Baal. And then, you know what? And then he comes back and he says, God, I still don't know if I'm sold out on this stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this fleece and I'm going to throw it outside. I'm going to throw it on the ground. And when I come back in the morning, I can't remember which way it went, but when I come back in the morning, I know it's you, God. If the fleece is all wet with the dew, but the ground has no dew on it, then I'll go. Oh, let's see what happens now. Because if he does this, then I know. So anyways, he puts the fleece out, and he comes back in the morning, and he looks at the fleece, and it's all wet, and all the ground around the fleece is dry, and so God must be with him. It's time to go. But Gideon's like, God, I got one more request. It's still not enough. Ever been there? Where you just, you're so hesitant to step out there? Is it just me? You're hesitant a little bit? Like, I don't know, God, I believe you. I believe I'm an instrument, but I need one more. So, okay, you did the fleece thing. So what I'm going to do now, God, tonight I'm going to throw it out. I'm going to throw the fleece out. But this time, I want the fleece to be dry, and I want the ground all to be wet. The greatest of all time. This is Gideon we're talking about. He's going to lead them. He just can't even get it right with God, and God's doing it. And so he wakes up in the morning, and there it is. Okay, guess what? The fleece is dry, and everything around it is wet. Okay, well, I guess we got to go. Like, we got to go do something. Now, the camp of Midian lay. This is verse 8, verse 9. You still with me?
Yeah.
Okay. So the camp of Midian lay below him in the valley, and during that night the Lord said to Gideon, "Get up and go against the camp, because I am going to give it into your hands." I love a God who gives you the outcome of the battle before you even fight it. That's awesome. God can give you the outcome of a battle before you even fight it.
Yeah.
Now, this is weird information. If you are afraid to attack, go down to the camp with your servant Purah. So if you're afraid to go down, go down. It's like, what? If you're afraid, because Gideon, even though God has showed him so much, and was there and said, I'm with you, Gideon, I don't know, I'm with you, Gideon, I don't know, I'm with you, Gideon. He's still trembling, but it's okay to tremble a little bit. We have a high priest who felt everything we felt. He felt everything that we felt. And it's okay to tremble. But you know what? You still got to go. If you're afraid to go down, go down. If you're, I don't know if I can forgive, just forgive. I don't know if I can get past this, get past it. Sometimes you're afraid you can't do it. You've got to just do it. I don't encourage that person. Encourage that person. And so this is what this call is. You're afraid? Go down. You can take this guy, what was his name again? Purah. Take that servant with you. And you can go down. If you're afraid to go down and listen to what they are saying. So this is, I've said a lot, don't listen to what your enemy says. Because your enemy's going to try to tear you down, and you don't want to listen because he's going to try to rip you up and try to make you feel like nothing. I've said it numbers of times, don't listen to what the enemy says. But here God is saying, go listen to what the enemy says. Because I've done everything I can do. Like, I did it sufficiently for you. So maybe you need to go see what they say about you. Gideon's like, okay. Well, he didn't get the, this is Old Testament, so he hasn't seen New Testament and all that stuff. He's just living in the moment. And he says, and go listen to what they are saying. Afterwards, you will be encouraged to attack the camp. So he and Purah and his servants went down to the outposts of the camp. And the Midianites and the Amalekites and all the other eastern peoples had settled in the valley, thick as locusts. There we go again. And their camels could no more be counted than the sand on the seashore. How many did I have again? 300, God? You give me 300? But God recruits. He knows what he's doing. And he goes down there and he's afraid and he's trembling. And he's supposed to listen to what the enemy said. But if the enemy is so interested in you and says that you're worthless, why is he even bothering with you? Because you are an instrument. You are a valuable instrument. And the enemy knows when you are getting hit hard, when you feel it getting hit hard, when you feel your life crumbling before, you are so close to a breakthrough with your name on it. And the enemy does not want that to happen. And so he will hit you hard. And so here we are. And so he arrives. And like, I'm supposed to listen to what the enemy said? Well, God said, I already told you what you are. So you might as well go listen to them. So he goes down, and this is weird. It's getting weirder. You're a weird instrument. We're all weird instruments in a way. And this story gets weird. So the Midianites, anyways, verse 13, Gideon arrived just as a man was telling his friend his dream. And I've read this already a few times, and I have a hard time reading this with a normal voice. I kind of want to read it like this. I had a dream, and he was saying, like, a round of loaf of barley bread came tumbling into the Midianite camp. And it struck the tent with such force that the tent overturned and collapsed. And his friend responded, this can be none other than the sword of Gideon, man. Like, it sounds like that. Like that. How do you get the sword of Gideon from that? Like, these guys, I think that they were, I don't know. Anyways, you read my mind. But I will read it because I'm not trying to take away from the Bible. I'm not trying to, but Gideon just arrived as a man was telling a friend his dream. I had a dream, he was saying. Think about this. A round loaf of barley bread. Now, barley bread is the cheapest bread. It's the bread that molds. It's the stuff that, the last stuff. Right? That's what you feed your people that come visit you. Barley bread. Okay? A round loaf of barley bread came tumbling into the Midianite camp. This is my dream, he said. It struck the tent with such force that the tent overturned and collapsed. And his friend responded, this can be none other than the sword, from the sword of Gideon, son of Joash, the Israelite. God has given the Midianites and the whole camp into his hands. I don't know how you get that out of that, but this is how I started looking at it. How I started to, put this together. Okay, so I had this dream. And there's this large roll of bread rolling down the hill. And it crashes the tent, the camp. And everyone's destroyed. And it's the sword of Gideon. How does this all happen? Because God looks at Gideon. He says, mighty warrior. He goes, that's not me. But he says, how about moldy bread? Oh yeah, that's me. That barley bread starts rolling, but it's not about the weapon. It's about the wind behind the weapon. And so you go, how fast does bread have to hit a tent? A can to bust it. Think about it. It's the wind. It's the hand of God. It is the instrument in the hand of God that destroys the tent. It is not the weapon. It is the wind behind the weapon that destroys it. It is in whose hand it is that matters. And so God says, I will give you them into your hands. Hands. Instruments. What does he do with his hands? He lifts them up and he worships God on the spot. So he told this little story. His friends responded, this can be nothing other than the sword of Gideon, son of Joash, the Israelite. God has given the Midianites and their whole camp into his hands. And Gideon's hiding, listening to this story. Because they don't see him yet. And when Gideon heard the dream and its interpretation, he worshiped God. I'm going to put them in your hands. This victory is going to be put in your hands. These are your instruments. And you put them up and you worship God. He returned to the camp of Israel and he called, get up, the Lord has given the Midianite camp into your hands. So finally, Gideon gives up and gets going. He finally gives up to God and he finally gets going. He gets out and he does it. And he recognizes, and I recognize, if somebody said mighty warrior, I go, huh? Moldy bread? Yeah, that's me, but it's not about me. I'm a weapon, I'm an instrument, but it's not really about the weapon, it's the wind behind me. And how much wind, how much the breath of God. When God goes down to the valley floor and looks at the bones, and he says, live, they live. The breath of God behind all of this pushing. And as the bread's coming down, and it's just moldy bread coming down the hill, and it's rolling fast. And the Midianites go, oh, look, moldy bread. And then they go, oh, look, hand of God behind the bread. That's who's pushing it. So today I want you, this is where Gideon has arrived. He is now, finally, he has given up. And now he is getting out and doing what God wants him to do. You are all instruments. You all have what it takes. Make sure that you put your instrument in the right hand. Amen? You know, just quickly, and we're going to be doing communion here real quickly. I can't help but think about the hands of Christ. And when he fed the 5,000, he had all the bread and he broke it. The bread was broken. But we're in his hands too, in the right hands. And I don't know about you, but I'm kind of broken. I feel like I'm broken sometimes. All the time I'm broken. But sometimes we need to be crushed. We need to be broken apart to multiply. And so that's what God does. That's what Christ does. Sometimes he will break us so that we multiply in the surrounding area that we